Welcome to Surviving the Dream with your hosts, Casey Arnold
and David Conley.
We're here to talk to people who seem to have their dream job and find out, what did it take? Is it what they imagined? Is it worth it? How do they do it?
Join us as we uncover the secrets of surviving the dream.
Hi, Dave. It's so good to see you.
Casey, it's been a while. I've been to Europe, but I'm back. I'm back in American soil and talking to surviving the dream. Now, one thing I've always liked about you, not only are you a comedian, you made a really good documentary. I was a big fan of that documentary.
Thank you. It's kind of what brought us together, right? Because your family grew up in the mental hospital, working there.
And your father
needed to be in one.
And it was a fascinating documentary. And but I'm going to bring in not one, but two people now who work together and have made a lot of documentaries. They've got like big shiny awards, which we all like, right? I mean, apart from the brass oak that you've got to use to polish them every now and again, they must get rusty. We'll ask them about that. But they've made so many documentaries. I think they are living the dream. Let's find out, shall we? Because we've got Dan Geller and Dayna Goldfine, and they are together. And they are... Is that right? Or have I got that bit wrong, Dan and Dayna? Maybe there's an update here.
We're still together.
Oh, yeah. All right.
Lots of questions. I'm very excited about a lot of these things.
Yeah. So go on. You start, Casey, because you're so excited. I don't want to slow you down. What do you want to know?
Some of us didn't go on vacation, and we need our real lives to be exciting. I want to know. I'm going to ask a few questions, and then you guys can pick which one you want to answer first. Like, was the dream always to do documentaries? And did you each do that separately before you came together, or was coming together part of what made the dream happen?
I definitely wanted to make documentaries. I grew up in a household where my dad had been an English teacher at public high school and wound up strangely and wonderfully in a career in film and mostly adapting literature to film for public television. But I saw how hard it was to raise the funds and then also just in the general film world, how difficult it was for people who were trying to direct something, trying to write something. Certainly, you know all about that you can be in limbo for so long. And then I realized, well, if you make a documentary, you generally don't have to wait around all that much. You could probably work inexpensively if the project felt right, and work with some real intelligence about a subject. And I decided to go to graduate school, not having studied this as an undergraduate, and went to film school, specifically Stanford's program, which is a documentary program. And as I was editing my thesis project, my master's project, that's when I met Dayna.
Right. And I think I had always wanted to be a creative something. I always wanted to tell stories or at least write poetry. And I got a job out of college working for, I don't even think they exist anymore because technology has moved so fast and far. But at the time, way back in the 80s, there were these things called video post-production houses. And I thought that was like a good avenue into the biz. But I quickly discovered that in the 80s, at least, as a woman, it was a real slog to try to break out of either being a secretary, a receptionist, or you could be a scheduler, but you couldn't really get to be an editor. I mean, you could, but I knew it was going to take too long and it was going to be too soul crushing. So I left that company thinking somehow I would get back into doing something creative, but not there. I met Dan. And Dan was doing his master's thesis, and it looked so fun and so dreamlike, even though I knew it was hard and there were, not all groovy, cool days, that after we dated for not that long, I think he was driving, so he was somewhat distracted. And I sort of whispered to him, I've always had this dream of working on projects with my partner. And I think I might want to be a documentarian too.
Wow.
And he didn't go up the road.
Well, first of all,
it's the first I thought it was going to be that moment from Parenthood where there was going to be steam coming out of the engine going, well, we had a little bit too far there, didn't we?
That it was, this is a detail that in all the 40 years we've been together that I don't think I've ever heard you say that you thought I was driving at the time, but that would make some sense to me.
Well, it's not like I plotted it. It's just that
Sure.
it happened while you were driving, and
Yeah.
I'm realizing in retrospect that you were somewhat distracted, and But at any rate,
Where were you driving? Were you lost at the time? That could have been really exciting, couldn't it?
where were you driving?
Yeah. You should have taken a right back there.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna say he was on his way to a location, and that's why Dayna was like, "Oh yeah, I want to work on this too, quick before we get."
Exactly. And
How
then
do you
Dan
guys? Sorry,
Go
I was
ahead.
gonna ask, how do you divide like the workload? Do you do the editing, and Dan, you do more of like the shooting and directing, or how do you divvy it up?
In general, other than on the Leonard Cohen project, we pretty much were in each other's business all the way through. Although it seemed that I would wind up shooting and Dayna would do sound on location and be the primary interrogator if we were doing interview portions of a film. That generally is the way it had worked.
I don't like the word interrogate.
Well,
I'd be worried, Dan, about letting Dayna get in the car with someone, quite frankly. She propositions people and says, actually, as we're here, I wouldn't mind doing what you're doing. Oh.
Well, my old business partner
Good
on
point.
the corporate side used to call Dayna Mike Wallace because, she really is a great interviewer and follows up on questions, and that's why I say interrogator in a sort of jocular way. And we both had edited our films. Eventually, we would start to bring in editors and work with wonderful editors like Bill Weber, Jen Bradwell. On the Hallelujah movie, we had brought an editor on. It wasn't working out. We fired that editor, and I had convinced Dayna to do something which I had wanted from the very beginning for that film, which I felt was just the time was right, the subject was right, and that Dayna was the lead editor on the Leonard Cohen, on the Hallelujah movie. But otherwise, we both produce, we both direct. We don't divide it up all that much.
Did you suggest that while Dayna was driving? Did you say,
Exactly.
I've been thinking of something for a while here. I think you should edit the rest of the film.
Actually, the truth is, if I'd only asked her the first time when she was driving, it probably would have been fine.
Yeah.
We would have saved the money we wasted on this editor we fired.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the reason that we both can do pretty much everything, although as Dan said, he shoots and I do the sound and the sound recording and the bulk of the question asking. When we started out, we had no money. We had no credits, really. I mean, Dan.
When you start out, I've still got no money.
Yeah.
Okay, we really had no money, and equipment was expensive back then. Like to rent, like you couldn't just go out and buy a camera that was as good as today's camera for a few $1,000s and start shooting. You had to rent cameras for several $1,000s a week, and
were you making on film at those days?
No, but the video cameras then weren't as good as the ones today, but it was just a new technology. People didn't own them; they rented, and
it was still cheaper than shooting film for a documentary. Right. There's no way. The first film we did together about Isadora Duncan, where we shot on sound stages, but we also shot out in nature, recreating dances and things like that. There's no way we could have used film stock and processing and then edited it and put prints together. It just would have been staggeringly expensive, and it was a fraction of it to shoot it on video. And I remember there's this story. It looks now like a standard definition, iffy quality video, but it was broadcast quality for the time, and it did wind up in movie theaters. One of the early documentaries to wind up in movie theaters as the first part of its life. But the Karen Cooper, who was at the Film Forum in New York, saw it, loved it, said that she wanted to program it, and when could she get a film print? And we said, well, it's video, and we have to do a film out. And she said, oh, if it originated on video, we will not show it. Those were those days. I mean, of course, that changed really quickly afterward.
Yeah.
But also, because we were coming from, Dan had his degree from Stanford in documentary production. I took classes at De Anza College in Cupertino, just like so that I could get my hands on equipment, and then we started doing this documentary. But, obviously there was no way that we were going to get funding at the time. And so at a certain point, after writing grant after grant, hopefully thinking that something would come through, we looked at each other and we were like, well, we're about to get married. We do have money that's come in for our honeymoon. Let's just use that. So our first documentary was actually funded using honeymoon.
That is artist love. You could only do that if you're married to the person who's also making the project with you.
Did you hear that, Casey? You don't have to go to Europe. You just have to get married and make a movie.
Exactly.
It can be a combo deal. I was going to ask how you get the funding. So is it mostly through grants, or now at this point that you have such a track record, you can get funding, or do you a mix?
Well, along the way, first of all, we realized that the kinds of films we make are not necessarily obviously social issue films. Some of them have a very serious underpinning of what that, but the storytelling is much more accessible and not just an essay. So we pretty quickly realized we weren't grant friendly, but we were doing two things on the side. One is that I had, with a former business partner, started doing a lot of corporate videos. And then Dayna was working for this one-man band financial consultant, and we would just pour the money, what little money we were making at the time, from the corporate stuff into the documentaries. And at that point, we did own a camera, and we had some sound equipment. So the next few films we made, which were cinema verite style films, we pretty much could just do it, the two of us. And that's how we worked for a while. Then a couple of films, we got a little bit of grant money just because there was a funder that was interested in it.
Yeah, like we would get enough grant money, or we would do these, at the time there wasn't a Kickstarter or anything like that, right?
But it must have been liberating that you were basically making the film that you want to make without someone saying, I'm paying for this. And there must be something in that, right?
That's the upside. That is the upside. And, we would sometimes find the second film that we decided we wanted to make was a total different thing from the one that we did about Isadora Duncan, which was very historical and used a lot of archival footage. And we were like, let's just, mix it up and do something in the cinema verite style. And because I had been an RA at Stanford, I had access to the people who ran the dorm programs. And we just posed this question to them, like, would you let us move into a dorm and just film for 9 months? And this is before MTV did The Real World. And, it was this novel idea. So they said we could. And then we needed to find, at that point, we realized we couldn't rent a camera because we needed a camera for 9 months. So we needed a grant that would allow us to buy the camera. And we found one head of a foundation who got what we were trying to do. And he said, so it occurs to me that if I give you enough money to buy the camera, the microphone, and the lights, and you're willing to live in a dorm room and eat dorm food for 9 months, you could probably make this film. And we were like, yes, we can.
So we moved out of the house we were renting in San Francisco, moved into a dorm room that we rented from Stanford. Because at Stanford, we just said we need unfettered access. It's our film. You have no say whatsoever over it. And at that time, that administration was really curious about what life on campus was really like, and what it would be for a freshman to encounter differences.
So this was like the first Big Brother. Is this what you're telling us? I mean, that's incredible.
Except it was just the two of us, so there were no hidden cameras.
World.
No, it was the first. It was the first. It was the first. All of that. Yeah, it wasn't Big Brother. It was the first Real World. Except that we didn't ever come in with any preconceived notions or set things up. And we were just we didn't get to pick the pretty, the 80 prettiest people who were 18 and could move into this dorm. Right. We got whoever Stanford put in this 80-person dorm, and then we found our characters.
So
one of the Frosh, we call them the Frosh. We're friends with a lot of them still. But one of the Frosh, who's not a main character, but he's definitely in the film, was just appointed to be president of Stanford University.
It's time for part 2.
Yeah.
But it's now. But I want to know what draws you guys to your documentary subjects, because they do seem to vary greatly. Right. Is it something that you're looking at in life? Do ideas just come to you? Do people ask you to do specific things? How do you decide?
It is all of the above,
Yeah,
really.
it kind of is.
I mean, I think what sticks for me is that if it's a story, whether present tense or historical, where there are really interesting people who are able to articulate as participants first, in a historical film, that what they lived through. And so it's character based, and you see an arc of someone's life or ambition. And if it's an observational film where someone's about to start going through really interesting things, it's so character based there has to be something where for me, where I resonate with that person and their spirit and what they're trying to do, and that's why, for me, the subject matter it seems so varied, because I'm not interested in a particular issue or subject matter.
I mean,
Do you have multiple ideas going at once, or you go? Is it like which one should we go with? Is there a moment when you go, okay, we're going with Leonard Cohen?
That's a good question. Not so much. It's more that, like, because we're so immersed in, like, so, when we lived in this dorm, like, that was all we could think about for, not just the 9 months that we lived with the 80 students, but then we had, hundreds of hours of footage we had to wade through, and just watching it took a summer, and then, a year or two to manage to get it down to 90 minutes. So we're really focused on that. We finished that film.
But there was overlap.
Oh, well, that one, yes.
So the other part is we've almost always overlapped two projects.
Right.
And one might get going sooner, and so we'll slow up the other one. Sometimes they are really going side by side. It's never been more than two projects, but we're not deliberately looking to do more than one or two at once, because it's just too overwhelming.
Well, or we'll be pushing to, like, that's true. When we got the idea to do Frosh, we also had read this really intriguing article in the New York Times about this art group in the South Bronx called Tim Rollins plus KOS, Kids of Survival. And I don't know what it was, something about reading that article, just, for me, it gave me chills. And I was like, we're supposed to do something with these people. And so we reached out to them. And at the same time that we were reaching out to Tim Rollins, we were also reaching out to Stanford. And so, it was sort of like, well, which one's going to happen first? And it turned out that we shot all of Frosh before we started filming. We shot all of Frosh before we started filming.
But we were editing Frosh.
But we were editing Frosh when we started filming.
Right.
Yeah, when we started filming Kids of Survival. So we've never actually, up until, I guess at one point we were even shooting two at the same time.
Yeah, we were.
So something like Hallelujah, which was a hit, right? Hallelujah was. I mean, how did that? Let's take that particular film. What were you working on beforehand, and what made you suddenly go, "Oh, we're going there"?
We had been working on the Galapagos Affair movie and Something Ventured. Both of those were going at the same time. They came out 2 years apart, but we were filming Galapagos and Something Ventured at the same time, and we had been, at that point, on the road with Galapagos Affairs as it was going around the world and into theaters. It took the better part of a year to support that. We were pretty burned out, having done Galapagos Affair and Something Ventured at the same time. We were pretty fried, and just thought, maybe we don't have an idea for a while, and that was okay for a bit. But then David Thompson, another expat Brit, and film historian and film critic and writer, he pitched the idea not about Hallelujah, but about what about a movie about a song?
Right. So it was over dinner. Basically, I think what happened is we finished Galapagos. Both of us were burned out because we'd also done this other film. Both of us allowed ourselves to ponder the idea that maybe our dream had changed and we didn't want to keep doing films. And then all of a sudden the exhaustion sort of took a back seat. We went to a couple really inspiring film festivals and hung out with our peers. And all of a sudden it was sort of like, speaking for myself, like my heart is now open to the idea again, or to an idea. And right around that time, which was probably 9 months after we finished Galapagos, we had dinner with these friends of ours. And David, the husband, said, actually, he said, I have an idea for your next film. And we got really excited about it because it's great to,
Well, because he in particular as a film person, um, could well have come up with something. When those words come out of someone's mouth who we've just met, or I have an idea for your next film, it's usually I cringe and think, oh God, no, because how am I going to be nice and tell this person?
Casey and me get that after gigs when people go, I've got a joke for you. And you go, oh, good.
Right. They're usually like, my life is the funniest life. I have the best story for you. And we're like,
oh, and I hope it's racist and sexist because that'll really work.
So what do you say?
We say, I usually listen to it and go, thank you very much. Are you coming tomorrow night? No, good. Excellent. But look, this is intriguing. Now, you said that you were nearly at the end of the dream.
Wait. But before,
hold on.
I want to know that, but I want to, can we backtrack one question before we get to that bit? I want to know, like, do the different movies affect you differently? Like the different subjects that you take on? Obviously, leaving the house you're renting and staying in Stanford, like that's going to affect your life like that, and being burnt out. But whatever you take on, does that affect you and like shift your trajectory, or
kind of, but also what's going on in the world, right? So I think the biggest kind of like in our early 30s to like leave our house and our somewhat adult life. I mean, you think you're an adult when you're 30, but you're not really. And move into this door. What's that?
I'll tell you when I get there.
Exactly. But to move into this place with 17 and 18-year-olds and like our whole lives, like that's who we hung out with for 9 months, to the point where, partway through the first quarter, we saw friends of ours walking across the lawn. It became really chic to like want to come to the dorm and have dinner with Dan and Dayna if you were like our peers. And the first time it happened, we were on our way to dinner and I looked up and a couple was walking across the lawn. And I said, oh my God, who are those old people? And they were, of course, like our 30-year-old friends. But they looked so old compared to these 18-year-olds.
Right, because you were fully immersed.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. But I think that like when we were doing a combination of the Galapagos and then something ventured about the original venture capitalists, that was probably the biggest degree of cognitive dissonance, because we would go to the islands and spend 5 weeks filming around people who had left society so that they didn't have to deal with money. I mean, there were lots of other dreams, but one big dream was like, how can I get away from the need for money and do barter and make my own life? And then we'd come back and there were these guys who were in their 80s who had spent their entire careers thinking about how to get richer and richer and richer.
Yeah. How does that mess with your head? Like, how do you guys reconcile where you stand?
Somewhere in the middle.
Is that part of like where the inspiration comes, I guess, is seeing all the different lenses? And then I'll shut up and get back to Dave.
Well, for me, I've just loved diving into a new world, and this is typically a 2 to 5 year process for any given film, and learning so much about that person's world, the milieu, the things that the field that they work in, and so it's just so broadening more than anything. And also, there's so many commonalities. It doesn't matter whether someone's trying to build a life in a remote archipelago or sitting there trying to write songs and trying to, the lives are filled with ambition and with frustration and with hopefully ultimately some measure of success. And I think that's what threads through all of the films, and I can relate to it. That's my life too. It's everybody's life if you're lucky.
I mean, yeah. And I think that in a way, like I never realize why I'm attracted to a project. There's always a philosophical reason, but it doesn't become clear until you're partway through the project, or until I'm partway through the project. So like with Frosh, I think that my theory is that we tend to, glorify youth and, that period of time. And for me, the gift of doing that project and falling in love with all of these very, sensitive and only partially, formed, emotionally formed 18-year-old people was, oh my God, I never want to go back and live that again. Like, I love them deeply and I'm thoroughly enjoying every single day, but I'm glad I'm 30. So that was like the gift from that. When we started doing Ballet Russe, I was about to turn 40 and we were working with all these. It was the first time we'd worked with 80-year-olds. And partway through, I turned to Dan and I said, I don't know about you, but I'm doing this so that I can have role models in the aging process. Because those dancers were so inspirational. Like, they all continued working almost until they died. And, you know, they were gorgeous and smart and vibrant, and you wanted to hang out with them, even if they were in their 80s and 90s. So sometimes the philosophical thing becomes evident as you're in the process.
I remember getting one of the biggest laughs I ever saw in the cinema was in Ballet Russe.
Which one?
It was when one of your dancers who was in her 80s, and they said, "What do you remember most about it?" And she goes, "The love affairs." And you've got this great octogenarian woman just talking about having so much sex. As a ballerina, and I think the whole audience just went, "Oh, that's fantastic." I've got to say something about Something Ventured and then I want to go back to my question I was going to ask a few minutes ago. But I went to the screening of that and the Q&A, and I'm not sure if you were there, but it's a life lesson that I learned from that film, and it was from a venture capitalist who was speaking afterwards, and I use this when I'm teaching all the time. The guy who talked about coil pots. Do you remember that?
He talked about what?
He talked about coil pots. It's a very strange metaphor, but it wasn't. I don't think it was actually in the film. I think it was in the question and answer afterwards. But he said that he went into schools and he sponsored an art project, and he got half the room said, "I want you to make the most perfect coil pot," and the other half of the room to make as many coil pots as possible. And at the end of the class.
What is a coil pot?
I don't want to interrupt the story, but I have no idea what you're talking about.
A coil pot is when you're making like a cup, but the way you do it is out of clay and you coil it around until it turns into a cup, right? Yeah. It's the first thing that a sculptor normally does, right? Their first lesson is like, okay, lesson 1, before we get you on the wheel, we're going to teach you how to make a pot by making your own coil pot. Anyway. But the lesson that he learned, and I quote this like once every 3 months when I'm teaching, is that half the class were doing making the perfect coil pot, and the other half had to make as many as possible. At the end of the hour, the half that were making the perfect coil pot hadn't finished it. They just couldn't, because they were trying so hard to find perfection. They couldn't finish it. The other half of the class had made so many that they'd actually come up with the ultimate coil pot.
Oh, interesting.
That sounds like something Don Valentine would have said during a Q&A session. It's true.
It's true. And I feel like that about jokes. I feel that about life. I feel like stop trying to make the most perfect joke. Write as many as you can. And then eventually you'll go, oh, actually, there's some really good ones there.
Aiming for perfection will do you wrong every single time.
Yeah.
You know who I bet said that was Nolan Bushnell, who started Atari. He's probably the most inspirational of all the people. Like, his mind, he started Atari. He also did Chuck E. Cheese. What
a failure.
But I mean, and he's actually embraces failure deeply. We went on the road with him to Norway when the film came out, and it was so fun because at the time, so this would have been 2011. And the idea of a self-driving car was actually not in anyone's, there wasn't the concept of it. And he announced that there was going to be one pretty soon. And just like that, his mind, he could have this vision of things. And he kept talking to the Norwegians about things like, well, the reason you guys aren't very successful in a capitalist way or with innovation is because you don't accept failure.
Right.
And you have to embrace the idea of failure in order to be truly creative.
That's amazing. I've just been listening to another podcast on the way here in my self-drive car, and it was a soccer player. And I can say that to you guys. I mean, footballer. And he was talking, and they said, "What makes you so good?" And he said, "I think what makes a really good footballer is how you cope with a failure on the pitch. Mm-hmm. How you get over it and how you detach yourself emotionally and go, I made a mistake. I'm going to make another one until you get it right."
Yeah.
And he said, whereas a lot of players, he said, they just crucify themselves because they make a mistake. And I thought, that's fascinating. It's in the same. Anyway, get back to
Is that a lesson that you guys practiced before you worked with him? Like, was that a takeaway for you also?
Well, definitely. Failure is for sure a part of all of, like, definitely in the editing room. I feel like we're failing on a daily basis because, you try something and you think it's going to work. And then you spend a long time trying to perfect it and you get to the end and you're like, oh, that was a dead end.
Right. Or the work in progress screenings that we would have here at our place where we'd have 15 people over and have a questionnaire and then have a discussion as well. And then go downstairs and have a bunch of food ready for everybody. And everyone else is chirping away and having a great time and eating the food. And I know that Dayna and I and Celeste, who worked with us a lot, or Bill Weber was editing, we'd sit there, trying to even put one spoon of food in our mouths because we're just so depressed looking at thinking, oh my God, they just told us the film is a total wreck. How are we going to fix it? You could feel the boredom in the room. And then you just...
But the bagels were great. The bagels were great. Such good schmears.
Right.
I want to go back to that question because you brought something up because this is about surviving the dream. And you said there was a moment where you went, is the dream over? Was that a moment where you went, I have another dream? Or was you going, oh no, I'm going to be the wrong side of the dream?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I think at the time, mostly I was like, I have to allow myself, I've been so focused on the identity. Dayna Goldfine is a documentary filmmaker. And when we finished Galapagos, we were both really burned out. Our relationship had taken a battering because we had done two simultaneously huge projects, one of which was for the first time we'd done something for hire. So we had that pressure. And I think to survive it emotionally or to get through it, I had to say to myself, embrace this idea that you might not ever make another film, and and then figure out, like, what would your life look like? What might you gravitate towards? So there was a period of like 6 or 9 months, I think.
I looked at it in a different way because we were still doing the corporate media work. So there was still, even though it was corporate media, there was still a sense of actively engaging with the tools of making, movies, if you want to call them that, but making stuff, working with cameras and working with editing and lights. And but I felt that I didn't need to go make another feature-length documentary. I had nothing to prove. That if an idea would come along and my emotional sense of well-being was sufficiently restored and it was a really interesting idea, then I would make it. And I had a sense that I knew I would make other films. It wasn't as though I had another career in mind or another avocation, but I knew I would make something. I just didn't feel like I needed to go make something in any kind of time frame. It might have been a year, it might have been 4 years. I don't know. But I didn't have to prove anything. And that took some of the pressure off at that point.
But I wasn't thinking about having to prove something. It was more like, how would my identity shift if I morphed out of making, if I decided to really choose to go, you know what? I think I'm over it. I think I'm ready to do something else. I don't know what it would have been, but just to allow my mind to, and body and emotional psyche to just be.
I heard poetry earlier on. I heard somebody on it was saying poetry. Would that?
Or, honestly, I've always had a secret love for horses. So maybe I'll go and actualize, try to figure out how I can ride or.
Maybe that's the next.
What would your 10-year Dayna? What would your 10-year-old Dayna? What did she want?
Oh, she wanted to be a veterinarian and work with horses.
Really?
Oh, there you go.
What did 10-year-old David want?
What did 10-year-old David want? I think 10-year-old David would want. I think I was influenced by what was around me. I think I thought I wanted to be a cricketer. Knew there was no way it was going to happen, or a footballer, even no way. But I knew I was good at drama, and I remember sort of telling myself, "God, you've got a shot at this." You could, and I remember walking around the village. I come from a tiny little village in Fulbourn in England, and I was walking around going, "You don't have to live here your whole life." I was home recently, and I was in Cambridge, which is in the vicinity, and I met a lot of school friends inadvertently. I went to a rugby match, and most of them still live in that village. And we were discussing that, and so that has come up where I was thinking I knew these guys when I was 10 years old, and they're still there, or some have actually left and gone back, and they said, "Are you coming back?" And I never really thought, no, I'll go back to that village. I mean, I've got no one there now, but I mean, it's like
you have me thinking. One of the reasons why, at that moment that Dayna and I were just describing, where I felt like I know I'm going to make another film, at some point. I knew that is because when we had first finished the Kids of Survival movie, every film festival except one in Hawaii rejected it because.
No, that was Frosh.
No, it was Kids of Survival. They all rejected it because.
No, we played in London and LA. It was Frosh.
You two need to go and have a drive and sort this out.
It's nice to see you reward
because it didn't get into Sundance.
Could our listeners please write in and tell us which movie it was?
Yeah.
Anyone from Hawaii, which film did you accept?
If any of the kids are listening, I don't want them to think that they're
wrong festival. But so we had gotten. You're right. We had gotten rejected from Sundance.
That's how you save a marriage, by the way. Yep, you were right. Yeah, brilliant. That's probably the most important thing we've learned on this podcast today.
We played at Sundance before with other films, but I remember thinking that we, first of all, Sundance in that moment was not the thing it became even a few years later. It was pretty big at that point, but not the giganto thing. But I remember thinking, oh my God, I know we made a really, really good movie. I knew it. I could feel it, right? And I was really bummed out, which is sort of silly, but I was really not happy. And Dayna had talked to a guy named Bob Hawke, who used to live out here, lives in New York now, consultant to a lot of independent filmmakers. And she had shared with Bob how down I was at that moment, because I just felt like, well, I can't make a better film than that. At least at that moment, I didn't think. And I remember Bob left a message on her answering machine. And he said, and I'll paraphrase, he said, "Dan, Dayna talked to me, and I understand you're in the dumps about what, you're not getting into Sundance with Kids of Survival." And he said, "I don't mean to be flippant, but I just have to say, what else are you going to do?"
This was Bob Hawke. Not the Australian Prime Minister who could drink a pint.
No, not that one.
He could drink a pint in a record amount of time. It's all over YouTube.
That's what you out of your politician.
I don't think he drank at all. But
different Bob Hawke.
It was an interesting thing because when he said that, I started laughing, and it's like, you're right. I have no fucking idea what else I'm going to do. I have no other possible talent or skill. And ultimately, that film went on to do really, really nicely and really well, and did get into all these other festivals and wound up in theaters and wound up on, I think, Cinemax. And anyway, it did. But that, I just remember that was the moment where I thought, it's sort of stupid to think that Sundance is the arbiter of anything, but it's a moment where I thought, well, I know I made something really good with Dayna, and that it was viewed as not worthy enough. That was the moment of crisis of confidence. And I think that having gotten over that, that's why after Galapagos Affair and Something Ventured, I didn't feel like anything other than I just need to take a break.
Because you knew, what else are you going to do?
Yeah.
I have no idea. I mean, I cook good meals. David knows that.
Yeah, great meals. The cassoulet is fantastic. Now, which brings us now, we're sadly coming towards the end of this. We're going to have to ask the questions that we always ask.
Well, I'm going to let this one be an added question.
Oh,
maybe.
Okay.
Do you guys, so now that you've realized, right, that when you're burnt out, you've come to question, but you'll make something else. Do you have any kind of routine to re-resource and re-inspire yourselves or get you back in that place, or you're just patient with yourselves now?
You know what? I actually haven't hit that again since Hallelujah. I mean, since that since that 9-month period, because
before Hallelujah,
because then Hallelujah,
Every time you say it, by the way, the earworm is back in my head.
I know.
With
Imagine
you.
editing for 2 years with that song and every version of that song. Luckily, I like the song. But, that one, because it was slowed down because of COVID, and it was such a kind of spiritual period working on the film, I don't know, I can't speak for Dan, but I didn't really feel like I needed to take a break because it went really slowly. Then we took a long time and traveled around the world with it because we were like, when are we going to ever do a film with a subject that is as universally beloved as Leonard Cohen? So let's just take this opportunity. That's a gift of getting older, to kind of go, I don't need to immediately start a new project. I can enjoy the fruits of this one. And if it means I'm traveling around the world and I do one less film in my life because I took this year, then that's okay.
But I think on a daily basis, because these films are such long haul projects.
Yeah, daily.
That I love to cook, so I cook several nights a week, and nice food, for Dayna and me, and for friends who come over. I think that's being able to create something in a very short time frame that other people can enjoy, and be creative as a chef. Even just picking up a guitar and noodling around with that. There's just things that are creative that have no audience, no financial pressure whatsoever on them, but that are creative, that just feel like that, that engine is going, that sense of some beauty coming into the world. And it doesn't take a lot of money in 5 years.
So it sounds like for you guys, the dream is measuring up to what you wanted it to be. Is that true?
Oh my God, I can't believe how fucking lucky we've been. No, it's crazy. Are you kidding me? That we've been able to sustain ourselves, live a really nice lifestyle, live in a beautiful city, make the films we want to make without anybody interfering with them, just for better and for worse. They're our babies. To be able to do that and then have this rich life of meeting other people in other fields as we make these movies, it's crazy. I mean, I never dreamed that it would unfold in this way and continue to unfold in this way. I'm so grateful.
Well, I don't think either of us understood how it would unfold. So I don't think we knew that we'd go from living in the world of Isadora Duncan to living in the South Bronx, to living in a freshman dorm, and then
still being married while doing it all.
Oh, believe me, there have been moments.
You two are like method actors, really, aren't you? You're just like,
That's kind of
you're Daniel Day-Lewis of the documentary world. Yeah, you just immerse yourselves in these societies.
I love it. Okay, now we can break into the question. Sorry, I derailed you, Dave. And mine, I'm going to start with Dan because it lends perfectly to it. I love to ask people, what's your favorite snack?
Snack?
Yeah.
Oh, without doubt, pretzels. Because first of all,
obviously,
who questions it? Anybody?
And because my dad, who passed away about a year ago, my dad loved pretzels, and there is a picture of me. My mom can't find it; she doesn't know where it is, but one of these small format prints. Me at about maybe a year of age, and my dad is holding me, and it's above the dining room table, and there was a big bowl of pretzels sitting there. So I think that might have been rather than a cake, it might have been a birthday pretzel. I love pretzels, love them. I love close second.
Dayna?
Oh, you want my snack?
Yeah.
Well, unless there was anything other than pretzels, obviously. I mean,
or olives. Olives are also allowed.
Here I am, like on a long drive, like say we're driving from San Francisco to Los Angeles to visit our friends Hannah and David. I would probably really like cheddar cheese popcorn.
Oh, nice.
We both have good snacks that travel. I like that. Okay.
All right. Now I'm going to ask you now, if you won the lottery tomorrow, the big one, it's a huge one, what are you going to do?
Me?
Yeah.
I am so buying a horse.
Oh. You can have more than one, Dayna. You can have. You can. You've got a lot of money now with this lottery win. You could have.
I just want one.
Oh, just one horse. Dan, what are you?
Dayna wants a horse, and she
Yeah.
wants to ride it.
All right, let's have a GoFundMe for Dana's horse. Dan, what are you going to do with your lottery, your huge lottery win?
I'd say two things. One, I actually replaced the window shades at the front of the house that are disintegrating.
Oh my
Literally,
God. Please, yeah.
let's do that.
Let's do that. I love that. I'll change my shades. That's probably the best answer we've had so far. You've won $100 million. Oh, I can change those shades on my window.
They don't need to be fancy ones either. Just ones that aren't literally crumbling.
Think how many pretzels you can have, Dan. That'd be.
I would. I don't need anything. I feel like we're able to travel, especially given the films that we're doing. Able to travel so nicely. To me, what I would do is take a breath and then figure out, if we're talking about a huge amount of money.
Yeah, it's massive.
What kind of advisor to creating a charitable fund to help with that and to help administer that and help distribute that, because I had for many years was on the board of a small fund for emerging Western States documentary filmmakers called the Pacific Pioneer Fund. It's shut down since, but for many years they gave us our first little grant, $2,500 on the Isadora Duncan movie, actually. And one of the great joys I had was giving away other people's money to young and emerging filmmakers. It was fabulous. So to be able to do that on a larger scale while still alive, rather than with whatever estate we might leave with a house, a parrot, and cats.
Who's taking the parrot? We've got to think about these things, guys. They live a long time.
He's eating his peanuts. But to me, that's what I would love to do, to be able to, especially for emerging artists, whether it's dance or film or comedy, where there's such a lack of support and funding, to be able to do that would make me very happy.
Do you know what, Dan? I want you to win the lottery now.
Yeah.
I didn't. That's what I've learned from this podcast. Out of all our guests, I hope you win it, actually.
Yeah.
Wait, you don't want me to have a horse?
Well, maybe Dan can give you a horse from all that money, right?
For emerging equestrians.
Casey, do you have another question?
Yeah. If we really knew you, what would we know about you?
Back to the pretzel tape.
I did not think I would stump you.
Well, I mean, if you, I guess the thing is that, I mean, I presume, I hope, even in the course of this conversation, you kind of get at least who I am. I'm out there without pretense. I have a seriousness about wanting to learn about the world and other people, and I love to laugh, but I don't think that there are layers and layers and layers of occlusion that prevent you from getting to know me pretty quickly.
He's saying he's very shallow after making all these documentaries.
I am, actually, yes. I am. But it's a very wide pool. So, you can enjoy yourself and you won't drown. You will not.
Shallow but wide. Dayna, what would we know about you?
That I'm actually a homebody. Like I can go out and I can,
on your horse,
really super, out there, gregarious, social face on, but especially post COVID, I'm much happier in many ways. Not much happier, but I'm much happier if I get to spend many more days and nights at home.
Okay, final question, and I'm not sure if it's even worth asking you this one, Dayna, but favorite animal and why?
Well, but you know what? If I say it out loud, then our two cats and our two birds are going to be really upset.
Oh, yeah. You've got trouble now, haven't you? They're going to be saying, we heard this podcast. We're moving out.
It doesn't have to be one that you want to have over them. It can just be one that you admire.
Yeah.
I'm an empath. I don't want the cats and the bird to feel bad.
Yeah.
No, and because one of the birds is sitting next to us.
Let the bird know why you love horses so much, and maybe the bird will learn something.
I just find horses I did start writing a little bit more about 9 months ago. And the one day a week when I was getting to be around horses, there's a soul opening that happens in a way that it doesn't happen for me. As much as I adore my cats and birds and all animals, really, like I said, I wanted to be a vet when I was little. There's something really unbelievably spiritual that happens when you're with a horse.
I love the fact that you've made a documentary about the Galapagos Islands, which has probably got the most prolific animals on the planet, and you've chosen a horse. I love that. Dan, what's your animal of choice and why?
Oh, I like our cats.
Dan.
I know Seymour's a pal, but as far as
someone's getting extra snuggles tonight.
Yeah, I'm not buying that. Yeah,
all right.
Oh, Seymour, I love you.
Yeah. Oh, that poor bird. You're telling the bird that you like cats.
I do. You know, and
yeah.
I love you.
Look, he and I can chat in the afternoon if I'm working.
Yeah.
Kyle, who's our assistant editor, he laughs every time because at random moments, Seymour just wants to check in. So, and he sounds perfectly human. So I'll be at my desk and you'll hear Seymour go, "Hey, Dan," and I'll say, "Yes, Seymour," and then Kyle starts giggling because that's all it is a checking in. Hey, Dan.
Yeah. Hey, Dan. Yeah. The cats.
I can't imagine life without Seymour.
But you prefer cats, is what you're telling him.
I prefer. It's just that I can't. Cuddly, a nice cuddly.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to top, and they start purring, and
we're both cat people, so you don't have to sell out.
Yeah, I'm a cat person. I've got to be fair. Yeah.
David, we do share that. But I have to say the lovely, like Seymour's 40. Mm-hmm. We've had him for 37 years, and the lovely thing about birds, if you're lucky, is that they really can outlive mammals.
Yeah. That's
That is definitely a perk.
Yeah. As soon as you get I think puppies are worse, isn't it? When you look at a puppy, you're saying, "Well, that's 9 years away from a tragedy," isn't it? Really?
Yeah. So
way to end it on a positive note.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys.
I have to say, 10-year-old Casey, because we're talking about her young 10-year-old Casey used to play talk show with her Barbies, and I feel like this is my way of enacting that. So
there you go.
Dream.
There you go. We've all survived the dream for another day. Well,
I like that.
Dan, did you have a favorite Barbie?
Say what?
Did you have a favorite Barbie?
They were all, I just made up stories about all of them. I can't remember their actual names, which is terrible because I wrote a bunch of movies for Barbie and I knew a lot of Barbies and I feel like it just failed.
Wow.
I do remember early on, so I had access to a Super 8 camera with a cable release, a little trigger release, and I would do little stop motion animation films. Probably was in 6th grade, 7th grade or something like that. And I did make rom-coms with G.I. Joe and Barbie.
Yes.
The films are nowhere to be found anymore. I begged my mom, are they anywhere? Those little.
Oh my God, that would be amazing.
But they were. I think one of them, and this is so many years ago, was the basis for An Officer and a Gentleman.
That is so funny. I used to have very elaborate storylines with my Barbies. That's probably how I learned how to write.
Wow.
I love it.
That's it. That's good.
Will they ever turn Barbie into a major motion picture? I wonder. Anyway,
if only anyone really wanted to see Barbie.
Yeah. Well, this has been great. I want to thank Dan and Dayna so much for sharing your dream with us. Very inspirational
and inspiring, and I can't wait to go down the list of the rest of your movies.
Yeah.
You are so welcome. It's been fun to talk to both of you.
If you can't find any of them, just let us know and we'll give you a link.
There you go. Do you get that, listeners? All right. Thank you.
Do you want to promote your website before we say goodbye so everyone can go and find it?
The website is just GellerGoldfineProductions.com.
No, just GellerGoldfine.com.
Oh, just GellerGoldfine.com.
But it's sort of outdated. It doesn't even have the new movie, which we're working on it. But
it has Hallelujah. It has all the ones that are done.
GellerGoldfine.com.
GellerGoldfine.com, one step above the Super 8 movies from Dan's childhood. Check it out. Watch a bunch of cool movies, and then it'll be new soon.
Dan Geller, Dayna Goldfine. Thank you so much.
Pleasure, you guys.
And David, I'll see you in a couple days.
See you in a couple of days. See you soon.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you,
Take
guys.
care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Quick shout out to Mike Nicholas for being our tech savior and Carmen Sclafani, also known as Wiser Time. Thanks for our music. And thank you all for listening.